Before you listen to this, I'm a tall 5'2" college girl who lifts and has a very take no shit attitude. I'm not a small girl and I definitely don't consider myself physically weak, yet this experience still shook me to my bones. This is long, but pretty cringy, so stick with me. My good friend Jack had told me that he met a guy who he thought I'd really get along with. Jack said he knew this guy named Alex decently well from his lifting meets, but that from what he could tell, Alex was a cool guy and super nice. Jack is a good friend of mine, and I've always trusted his judgment. Jack said he met Alex multiple times, and that Alex had always been super nice and really seemed like a good guy. So Jack kinda set Alex and I up. Keep in mind throughout this that Alex is a 6'3" and 300 pounds powerlifter / bodybuilder. Alex and I started talking, simple stuff at first, but it seemed really easy with him. He texted me first most of the time and held good conversations. He was a good looking guy with similar interests of mine. We seemed to get along well. He gave me some pet names about a week and a half later, like Babe and Baby, but I didn't really mind or think anything of it, as guys tend to do that stuff anyway, and he and I had pretty much been flirting with each other all the time. He was very kind and polite with me over the phone, texting, Snapchatting, etc. We got really comfortable with each other and told each other some really deep and personal things. We talk on the phone for multiple hours each night. Things seemed to be going well. After almost 3 weeks of texting, Snapchatting and talking on the phone, Alex and I decided that we should hang out. Now, Alex is a little over 2 hours away, but I agreed to drive to see him if he'd pay for gas money. Because he was so far away, we seemed to get along swimmingly. I agreed to spend Saturday and Sunday night with him, spending the night at his house. Because I'm a grown woman, I figured spending the night wouldn't be such a big deal. Saturday comes around and I make the drive to meet him. I adore the drive, simply because I love to cruise and listen to music. The countryside was beautiful. I arrive in his town and find his apartment and park behind his car. I go up and knock on his door, and he opens it and gives me a huge bear hug and squeezed me really hard to where my back cracked. I found this odd, but I didn't think too much about it until later on. We sat on his couch and started talking for a bit, but within 5 minutes of me being there, he has his tongue down my throat. We had flirted quite a bit over text, so I didn't think too much about it. He tried to undress me, but I pushed his hand off of me and told him not yet. I wanted to actually get to know him a bit more, but he totally insisted for about 20 minutes, and I gave in, although I wasn't totally comfortable with it. We messed around. It wasn't enjoyable because I was uncomfortable the entire time. He gave me really weird vibes, and the more I thought about it, the more my stomach hurt. We finished up, and he held me as we watched some Netflix. He kept kissing my forehead where my hairline was, and I realized that he was actually tasting my sweat. This made my stomach churn, and I rolled over so my back was facing him so he couldn't anymore. He soon fell asleep and started snoring. I tried to calm myself and slept for a while to try not to think about it, hoping that when I woke up, I'd feel better. I mean, he and I had been getting along so well over the phone, right? I was sure that I was just being silly. However, when I woke up, I felt worse. My stomach hurt and my skin was crawling, and I just knew that something wasn't right. I slipped out of bed and went out to the living room to find my phone and my clothes. I got dressed, sat on the couch, and texted a group chat with 2 of my really good friends, one guy and one girl. We tell each other just about everything when it comes to boys, and they had both known that I was going to meet up with him that weekend. I texted them at 6:45 PM, telling them that he was asleep and that I wasn't totally comfortable. I told him that I really didn't want to piss him off. I didn't trust him, he scared me a little, and that I'd stay there that night, but I wasn't going to spend tomorrow there, and that I'd head home in the morning. They told me to leave now while he was still asleep, but I also agreed that I might be overreacting a bit. I jokingly told them that I wouldn't leave until I got my gas money. They agreed, joking back with me. They talked to me for a bit while he slept, acknowledging my worries and telling me to keep them informed, but also joking around and lifting my spirits a bit. I started to feel like maybe I was just worrying myself for no reason. At 7:49 PM, I texted them that he had woken up because I could hear him getting dressed in the other room. I turned my phone on vibrate so he wouldn't get curious to who I had been talking to. He came in and kissed me on the forehead and sat down on the couch next to me. We talked normally for a bit before he had made a really shitty comment about how much he hated cops and how he would probably shoot one if he got the chance. I cocked my head as I listened and furrowed my eyebrow, asking, "You realize my dad is a cop, right?" He looked me dead in the eye and said,
"Yeah, I remember you telling me."
But he gave a chuckle and followed up with,
"But of course, not him."
My stomach dropped again, and his eyes held mine for too long. I didn't waver. I'm a pretty defiant girl, and I didn't say anything. I wasn't going to back down either, and soon he looked away. Quickly after that, he asked me if I was hungry. I told him that I was, and he called and ordered a pizza for carryout, as we had planned a pizza and a movie night that night. He kept calling me his baby, but he would barely hold an eye contact with me, other than that awkward time after I mentioned my father. I quickly texted the group chat as he got his shoes on and such, letting them know that I was still really uncomfortable and mentioning that he refused to hold any eye contact with me at all, other than in really long and uncomfortable bursts. I joked with them that I would stay there for the pizza, since I'm a chubby girl. While we waited for the pizza to be made, we had about 15 minutes before we had to go and pick it up. We laid on the couch with him sitting in between my legs, my back to the armrest. He played with my feet, and I've dated a boy with a foot fetish before, so I didn't think too much of it, splaying out my toes to where it hurt and also digging his nails into the underside of my toes. I would flinch, but he seemed to like my flinching away, so soon I just grit my teeth and let it happen. He asked what size my feet were, and I told him, and he seemed pleased with my answer. I'm a tall girl, 5'10", and so I have pretty large feet, but he also made a comment about how he wanted to keep them for himself, which made my skin crawl. I'm a very defiant and generally decently sassy girl, but I don't enjoy confrontation, and this man scared me, so I felt frozen. I texted my friends that he was playing with my feet and jokingly sent them, "Is the pizza even worth it?" My friends have decent senses of humor, and the girl replied, "If it ain't Pizza Hut, it's not." Talking to them gave me a bit of security and relief, and I kept telling myself that I was probably overthinking some stuff. My guy friend from the group chat was worried about me and telling me to get out of there. I wanted to, but at that point, I felt like I was too deep, and I was honestly scared he was going to hurt me or try and stop me if I tried to leave. I decided I'd eat pizza with him and see if it got any better. We got into his car and went to get pizza, and on the way there, I mentioned that I really liked his little town that he lived in, as it was similar to where I go to college, and as we passed the building, he mentioned that he used to be a Yell leader there. This was the first normal intro to conversation that he said all night, so I asked him how he liked doing that. His answer was,
"I liked the guys, but I fucking hated the girls. Dumb bitches didn't even know shit. I actually threatened one of the girls once that I was going to give her a Colombian necktie, and my coach told me that I should go through with it."
I, being a dumbass and somewhat sheltered girl, asked what a Colombian necktie was, and my stomach flopped as he explained it. "I highly doubt your coach would tell you to go through with that," I said in a dry tone, testifying at his story, because I highly doubted that it was the truth and I hate lies. He just told me,
"Whatever,"
and drove on. He then proceeded to dig his thumb into my leg as his hand had been resting on my thigh close to my knee. I pushed his hand off of my leg and told him that him digging his thumb into my leg like that hurt, and he just looked over to me, gave me a huge smile, and said that he was testing me. Thankfully, we got to the pizza place quickly, and he got out to get the pizza. I told him that I would stay in the car, but really, it was just so that I could text my friends. I told them what had happened, and I considered bailing out of the car right then and there. But as the thought crossed my mind, he was already coming back out of the store with the pizza and getting in the car. I put my phone back under my right leg and looked straight ahead as we drove away from the pizza place, instantly regretting not getting out of the car while he was away. As we drove, he asked me about my parents, a relatively normal question, or so I thought. I told him that I was really close to my mother, but had been closer to my dad when I was younger. I mentioned that I had talked to my dad on the phone on the drive up. He grabbed my leg again and asked with a gut-wrenching inflection in his voice,
"Yeah? I bet you're a daddy's girl. You sure look like one. Do you love your daddy?"
And although I wanted to scream, I turned to him, looked him dead in the eye with a bland expression on my face, and said, "Yep." Apparently, that wasn't the reaction that he was expecting, because after that, he shut up and didn't say anything until we got into the house again. I walked up to his door carrying the pizza, but I felt like I was in a dream. My legs were walking forward, but I was screaming at them to run the other way. However, I couldn't, because I knew my keys were still sitting on the arm of his couch. I decided to play the role and get out when I could. We ate pizza. I watched him put my pizza on my plate, actually worried that he was going to drug me or something. I ate slowly, trying to prolong the time that I could spend out of his arms, because the entire night, other than when he was asleep, he had been touching me one way or another. I had already excused myself for the bathroom once when I actually had to go, and I knew that I couldn't again without raising suspicion, so I was stone-faced, trying to keep my panic at bay. He turned on a movie as we ate, and I actually got into it a bit. It definitely wasn't something that I would actually watch, but I think I just needed a distraction. During the movie, a girl started crying and hyperventilating because she had watched someone get shot. He laughed and shook his head. I looked at him a little warily, but didn't say anything.
"I dated a girl who would have panic attacks,"
he said, saying panic attacks in the most mocking tone I had ever heard before.
"She'd have them at night, and I knew she was just faking that shit, so I would cover her face with a pillow and lay on her until she would shut up. She'd fight it for a while, but after a while she'd stop."
He said it so casually that my heart flared for that girl. "That's fucked up," I told him blandly.
"Why?"
he said. "Why would you treat her like that?" I asked, obviously a little heated. He laughed, obviously enjoying how upset I was getting.
"Because I couldn't fucking sleep."
"So go sleep on the couch," I said, my tone getting flat and obviously over his shit. He gave me a deadly look and said,
"I don't sleep on the couch."
I shrugged and laughed mockingly at his macho man routine, trying to seem indifferent, although I was actually scared shitless, and said, "Whatever." I turned back to the TV, but I could feel his eyes on me, glaring a hole into my face. I didn't waver, and focused on what the actors were saying. Soon, I felt him shift, so he was practically laying on me again. We watched, just for a few minutes, and my mind raced. I am an overthinker, so thoughts of what he might do to me if I stayed there flickered through my mind. I then realized that I didn't know where my phone was. I looked around best as I could, and I saw it on the floor. I reached down and scooted it closer towards me before he grabbed my other hand and started sucking on my fingers. My toes curled in disgust, and I wanted to vomit when I thought about the fact that he had actually touched my bare flesh before. I grabbed my phone with my free hand as he was distracted and set it on my chest. I took my hand away from him and he let it go. After a few minutes, he grabbed it again and I took it away before he could kiss at it again.
"What the fuck, babe?"
he asked. I wanted to scream that I wasn't his babe, but I said in a matter-of-fact tone, "I'm not in the mood and I want to watch the movie." He muttered under his breath, just barely audible enough for me to hear over the TV.
"Bitch, shut the fuck up."
My stomach shriveled up at his words and my skin felt like it was on fire. The feeling of rage and fear made me feel sick. "Excuse me?" I asked. He looked at me surprised that I heard him, and we held eye contact for way too long. His eyes were unwavering and deadly. He was waiting for a reaction. I decided that I wouldn't give him one, so I looked back to the TV, but my skin pricked into goosebumps to the point that they were actually hurting. Once he also looked away, I texted the group chat. I directed my text to the girl. "I need you to call me in tears, saying that my mum is in the hospital. Make it believable. He's right next to me. I need to get out of here, please." She agreed, and a few minutes later she called me. I answered, and she put on a show about how my mum wasn't doing well and that she needed to be there. I agreed and kept the phone to my ear as I quickly got up and put my shoes on, while also getting my jacket and keys. He stood as well and was obviously unhappy, towering over me as I tried to get my stuff together. I hung up the phone after putting on a pretty decent show and looked to him. I explained to him that I needed to go, but I would text him after. Before he could protest, I was at the door, where I had failed to realize that there were 3 different locks that he had locked. I fumbled with them, my hands shaking. He kept his deadly gaze on me and asked,
"You'll come back in the morning, right?"
To make it believable, I turned and gave him a kiss. "Of course, I just gotta deal with this, I'm sorry," I said. He perked up at this and agreed, unlocking the 3rd lock for me. I shut the door behind me and practically sprinted to my car. I pulled away quickly, and as I got to a stoplight a few blocks away, I broke out and sobbed. A rush of relief came over me, as well as the realization that I had trusted this man, who was completely different than who he seemed to be. I felt so stupid. I called my friend, the girl, and let her know that I was safe and that I was driving home about 2 hours away. By now it was well over 10:30 at night. I texted the group chat to let my guy friend know as well, and my foot was heavy on the gas as I drove. I checked the review mirror multiple times, hoping that he wasn't following me. Tears of relief and regret streamed down my face for almost half the drive home, but stopped as I finally hit the interstate. I felt safe and free from him as I took the on-ramp towards my home. My skin has been crawling since I got home, and I haven't been able to get the things that he said to me out of my head. I'm not a religious person, but Alex, I pray that we don't meet again. Moral of the story: don't trust people you've only spoken with over the phone. Not everything is as it seems. Note: there was a lot more cringy stuff that he said to me, but I didn't want this to be too long. And for those who are curious, once I got home, I blocked him on all of my social media and through my phone as well, so I haven't heard from him since. I recently gave birth to my son, who's my first child, and is definitely a ridiculously cute baby, but I never anticipated it to be to the point that random elderly women would try to snatch him. We live in Flagstaff, Arizona, and we're about to make the 2-hour journey to Phoenix to visit my mum, as we do every other weekend. Baby was bundled up because it's freezing right now and taking a nap in his car seat. I was standing out in the cold, pumping gas, the sun still barely coming up. It was about 5 in the morning. I finished pumping gas when, all of a sudden, I noticed movement on the other side of my car through the windows. I can only see the back of my son's car seat with all the blankets, so I can't see if he's still inside. I feel my heart beating with just an instinct that something was amiss, and I walked slowly around the other side of the car. I see an old woman, probably in her 60s to 70s, holding my son out in the freezing cold without any of his blankets, smiling this ridiculously insane smile at him and going, "Oh, look at you." My son's about to cry because she just woke him up and she's bouncing him and shushing him, and I literally yelled at the top of my lungs, "What the fuck are you doing?" The old lady nearly jumps into the air and she has these wide eyes, and as she looks at me and she opens her mouth like she's about to say something, and then she shuts it again and holds my son closer to her, as if she's shielding him from me. Then, the crazy bitch has the audacity to say, How dare you shout at me like that? I was livid. I stomped towards her and told her, "Give me my fucking baby." She opened her mouth and began to say something, and I cut her off and said, "Now, or I'll fucking swing." When she still hesitated, I just dove in for it and snatched him out of her hands so quick that she nearly fell over on the ice. He started crying at this point, and I was checking him to make sure that she didn't do anything, and she started to rant. "Look, he's crying now. He knows his mother is a disgraceful, disrespectful bitch. You should be ashamed of yourself." I gave her the dirtiest look that I have ever managed to make in my life and started screaming at the top of my lungs. "You do not open someone's car door, unbuckle their baby and take him out. You do not grab him and refuse to give them back. You're fucking insane." She started shouting unintelligible stuff, something along the lines of her hoping that my son hates me in the future or whatever, to which I angrily stomped towards her, which made her scurry away while still screaming at me. I buckled my son back in quickly, soothed him, then got in the car and sped away. Halfway through my escape, I realized in my anxiousness to get away from her, I forgot to do something like, call the police and have her arrested, so that was great. I'm glad my son is safe, but I'm dumbfounded at how insane and truly dangerous people are. It could have gone another way. I could have not sensed something was wrong and got back in my car and sped away without realizing my baby was taken. That's the scariest part for me. This was a quick incident a few years ago, but I still think about it every day. I was 21 at the time, often mistaken for an 18-year-old. My husband and I were driving home after I picked him up from work around 6 o'clock, and the sky was just getting dark. He was quite tired from work and the drive home was about half an hour, so he leaned his seat all the way back and napped. I stopped over for gas and quietly got out of the car to not wake him up. Right as I started to shut the door, a hand grabbed it and a voice demanded that I get back in the car. Of course, I screamed and my husband quickly woke up and jumped out of the car. I turned to see an older man in very baggy, old-looking clothing and meth sores on his face back up quickly with his hands in the air.
"I wasn't going to do anything. I wasn't going to do nothing to her,"
he said to my husband as he knelt to the ground as if to show how harmless he was. I was shaking and told my husband to just get back in the car. The man took that as his opportunity to bolt out of the gas station lot and into the woods behind it. We sat for a minute, then went inside and called the police with the cashiers inside. He obviously thought I was alone because my husband's seat was so low and he was out of sight. I find a little comfort in the fact that if he'd kidnapped me, we'd only have gotten about 15 miles because our gas was very low. I hope he just planned on robbing me, but I'll never know. When I was about 13, my parents and I moved to an old house. It was at least 90 years old. It was large and it was in pretty good condition for a house that old. I was an only child. I got the second biggest room on the second floor, and that room was huge. Sometimes my parents left me at home by myself for a few hours. Whether they were going shopping or on a date, I always asked to stay at home. I didn't mind staying at home because I liked to think of myself as responsible and trustworthy, and it made me feel special. One night, at around 6 PM or so, my parents had to go run some errands. They were the kind of people who spent long hours out shopping for the best deals, as they used a lot of coupons and whatever they could, and I did not want to be involved in this at all, so I decided not to come. I stayed in my room and watched some TV. Then, at around 8 PM, I got hungry and decided to get a snack. Now, at this point the house is very dark, so I grabbed my cell phone and used it as best as I can to light up the hallway, since the hallway didn't have a light. Now, this was before cell phones had built-in flashlights, so I just used all the lights my screen could give until I made it to the kitchen. The kitchen light had been left on by my parents. I put my phone on the counter, and as I was walking to the pantry, I saw a man hunched down in the corner by the back door. He was wearing black and red clothing, and he had long, greasy, unkempt hair. I didn't see his face because his head was facing the wall. He was holding a large knife. He didn't notice that I had spotted him. I wanted to scream, but I used my hand to cover my mouth and walked back upstairs, leaving my cell phone down there. I was not walking over to get it. We didn't have any phones upstairs, so I walked into my room, locked the door, and I hid in my closet. I start crying silently, and I start thinking the worst. He was going to find me and kill me. I just knew it. Then I heard someone coming up the stairs, heavy footsteps. I felt sick, and I had never been so afraid in my life. Then I heard someone open the door to my parents' room, which was 2 rooms away from mine. I then hear police sirens outside, and I hear the door being knocked on. I breathe a sigh of relief, and I hear the man running back down the stairs quickly, and he's trying to open our back door. Then I hear our front door being pushed down, and I heard footsteps of 2 people coming up the stairs, and they start searching our home. The police came to my room and let me know that it's safe, telling me to open the door. I later found out that our neighbors saw this man unlocking our back door with a key and saw that he had a knife and called the police immediately. My parents arrived a few minutes later and my mum started hugging me and crying. The man unfortunately escaped, and I cried and got no sleep that night. Because the man had a key, we changed the lock, but we eventually moved out of state. I'm 23 now. I have moved past it, but there are several questions I still have. How did he get a key? Why did he want to come to our house? And what would he have done if the police showed up any later? This is my dad's story. Back in the 1980s, my dad and a buddy decided to travel the world. They went to a number of places including Japan, South Korea, Thailand, Taiwan, Australia and New Zealand. It was in Australia where my dad and his friend were approached by a man. He was tall, about the same height as my dad, with black hair and a mustache. Now, note that it was obvious they were tourists. They had their backpacks on and a Canadian flag patch on each. A man approached the 2 of them and struck up a conversation. My dad says instantly he got a bad vibe from the guy. But for the sake of being polite, my dad and his friend, who isn't known for his sense of self-preservation, continued chatting to the man. The man asked my dad and his friend if they had any place to stay. When they admitted that they didn't, the man said,
You know, I've got a buddy who lives just a short bit away. In fact, there is a whole community of people out there who just love tourists. I'll give you 2 a ride.
Dad instantly got red flags and told the guy no. He seemed to get pissed and kept insisting, but Dad and his friend kept insisting that they would be fine. Finally he left and the 2 found somewhere else to stay. Years later, Dad told me this story and I got curious and decided to do some digging. I went on a Wikipedia page and I pointed out the picture of the man to my dad and it matched. The man that they encountered was Ivan Milat, a serial killer who's famous for the backpacker murders. His first killings started in 1989 when my dad and his friend went to Australia. He has killed approximately between 7 to 12 people. I'm glad that my dad listened to his gut and didn't go with him. Otherwise he would have never met my mother and later adopted me and my little sister. I hate to think that my dad and his friend could have been the first victims of a serial killer. I'd like to share with you one of the strangest and creepiest stories of my life for your entertainment. In 2008, I was attending night school at CALC, Broadview and Danforth in Toronto, Canada. And one day I was about 40 minutes early for class, so I decided to go smoke a little joint I had on me. I walked down behind CALC and over the little walking bridge that goes over the DVP, which is the highway throughout the city, on ramp, and found a little area off of the main trail that goes out to Riverdale Park. I lit my little joint and started smoking, when an older Asian man in his late 50s, early 60s walked up to where I was chilling. I figured he was just out on a walk. He had a little grocery bag in his hand wrapped around something, and he smiled and nodded at me, and I used to be super friendly, so I smiled back. I decided to walk out of there and find somewhere else to smoke before class. As I walked down the trails, he began to follow me. I even started taking trails that made no sense, and I even went in a circle, but he still followed. Now, he was fiddling a lot with the bag in his hand. I walked back out to the main trail where there were people. It was only about 6 PM in June and still very light outside, and he still followed me all the way down the trail out to the park. He seemed to lose interest in me and started looking at some flowers and stuff, so I walked out a bit further and finished my doobie. At this point I thought he might be a cop or something, because at the time I'm an in-shape 18-year-old male, full punk gear, tattoos. I mean, people thought I was scary, and there were women walking alone on the small trails with headphones on, so why would he want to attack me? Either way, I was feeling uneasy. Once I was done smoking, I began to walk back up the trail towards the school. He started following me again. As I sped up, he sped up. As I slowed down, he slowed down. I stopped to tie my combat boots tighter in case he was going to attack me or something, and he even stopped. By now I'm back at the little walking bridge and see 2 random joggers stopping to take a break. I walk up to them pretending I know them, but low-key explain what's happening. They played along for me, and the guy went off into the wooded area. I decided to walk back over the bridge to class. The man never stopped staring at me from the forest as I walked over the bridge. I kept looking back as I walked on the cement path that goes along the field behind the school. I was at least a solid 75 to 100 meters away from the walking bridge, and he still wasn't in sight or following me. I figured he had finally fucked off and I was good, so I took one last look back, very far from the bridge now, and didn't see him. I put in my earbuds and started listening to music to calm me down. Within 30 seconds of listening to my music, it cut out due to a phone call from my girlfriend. When this happened, I suddenly heard footsteps close behind and spun around, only to see this same man, who I thought was gone now, just 5 feet behind me. I run up the stairs and see my classmate at the time, Warren. I throw off my bag and studded jacket, and we get ready for a fight if needed. He walks past us, up the path to Danforth, always looking at us. He walks, then back down the path towards us, stops, and looks at me and smiles in such a way that I felt sick to my stomach. It was as if he was smiling to let me know that I was lucky I got away from him. He had his hand in his grocery bag, fiddling with something. He took off behind the school and was gone. I reported it to the school in case he went after any of the other students, and my mum thought it would calm me down to remind me that Jeffrey Dahmer liked to go after in-shape 18-year-old men. I didn't see him when I left school that night, but 2 weeks later, he was in the paper arrested for masturbating on the subway while holding a woman at knife point. He was wearing the same shirt in his mugshot that he was wearing when he was following me. I grew up in a small foothill town just south of Tahoe, where this whole mess happened. It was a few years back, but I think about it frequently. I'm a fairly tall girl on the thinner side. I've always been convinced that my height was a factor in deterring creepy people from bothering me. I used to run through a smaller sub-neighborhood within my mum's neighborhood frequently, and I was about 17 when this happened. I was about 10 minutes into my run, not exhausted luckily when this began. I saw an all-white van driving near me when I entered the neighborhood. I had headphones in, so I wasn't aware that it had been following me for a great deal of time. Another 10 minutes passed, and I looked back and could still see the van, but this time it was parked. I got kind of creeped out at this point, but I figured it would be best to turn directly and stare at them, making sure they knew that I saw them. I don't know why it made sense at the time, but I had been told in a self-class defense before to make eye contact and stand your ground, so I guess that's what I tried to do. I could see a young guy, maybe in his mid to late 20s, driving the van, but I couldn't quite see who was in the passenger seat at the time, but someone was definitely there. I felt like I had been staring them down for at least a couple of minutes, and none of us were moving. Then, the passenger side door opens, and out steps a beautiful, young, blonde woman. She couldn't have been older than 30. She just kind of stood there, staring at me, and beckoned with her hand for me to come towards her, smiling the whole time. After she beckons and I don't respond, she opens the sliding back door of the van, and two young children step out. They looked like they could have easily been these people's real children. They were all blonde and white, and they looked very similar, maybe between the ages of 5 and 7, one boy and one girl. Once the kids came out of the van, I had an initial feeling of relief, thinking that maybe it was just a family who's readjusting their situation in the van, and I was thinking something more sinister than it was. I had been a nanny for a while at this point, and I knew kids could be fussy at times. Once I could actually see the kids' faces, and see the empty vacant look in their eyes, my panic quickly returned. The woman tried to take the hand of the youngest girl, and she ripped her hand away. I don't know if the woman could see my facial expression change or me start to turn to run away, but she full charge ran for me, like an Olympian track star, I swear. I was freaking out. I just turned and sprinted away as fast as I could. She ran after me for a block or two, honestly much further than I had expected. When I turned back, I could see the van full force driving towards me with her still on foot, making ground on me. The fact that this lady could run like a beast still haunts me to this day. I ended up hopping the fence of a nearby neighbor's house that had a dog that I was chummy with. I hid behind the fence and could hear them get out of the van and approach it. At this point I was so terrified that there was no way I was looking up to see them again. My neighbor's dog friend thankfully saved the day and started barking like a crazy dog, which I think scared them off. As insane as these people seemed, I guess they didn't want to deal with that. I've told this situation to several people, including the police, all of whom say that I'm probably just misreading the situation where someone wanted directions. Abductions are something that basically never happens in our small town, so I guess that accounts for the skepticism. One of the cops even said that I didn't fit the meek body type people usually troll for to kidnap. Regardless of what anyone says, I know what happened, and I've never been able to forget it. By far, one of the most intense situations of my life.